Hey everybody, welcome back to Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. It's the podcast where we talk about professional wrestling. And I gotta say, the last couple of episodes we've done, I don't know about you, buddy, but the last couple of episodes we've done, to me, have been just a crushing disappointment.
Yeah,
Not in terms of performance, but of like the stuff we have to talk about.
absolutely.
We had to talk about Extreme Rules, which I don't know what the fuck. We've had to talk about idiots not wearing masks. We've had to talk about the fucking Young Bucks and their shitty T-shirts. We've had to talk about Money in the Bank, whatever the fuck,
Yep.
It's been a lot to take regarding modern wrestling.
Mm.
That's what I'm gonna say. So I was feeling very just fed up with the whole wrestling thing to begin with, just not having a good time. But I decided to check out a couple of like random matches on the WWE network, because there's so many matches on that network that people might not ever see or might not even think of looking up. So I thought, why don't I randomly look for a couple of matches and see if we can find some hidden gems, some really cool things that you can only find on the WWE network, or easily more easily found on the network than fucking anywhere else,
Mm-hmm.
And I asked you to do the same, to come up with a couple of hidden gems that you find on the network. So that's what today's show is going to be. We're gonna, instead of bumming everybody out with how shitty modern wrestling is right now, and some days it gets to be a real chore, we're just gonna give you guys some suggestions for stuff that, if you're fed up with the modern stuff, let's hear some, like, old classics, old fun matches you might not be aware of. Something to distract you from the crushing realization of how terrible modern life is, if that's a good way to put it. So, do you want me to go first, or would you like to go first?
No, you go first if you want.
Okay. Well, this is the match that kind of sparked this all off, because I saw highlights of this match on Twitter, and I'm like, I gotta watch that match. I'm gonna watch this match, and I did, and it was fun. I should say that, like, most of the matches on my list, they're not like quote unquote 5-star classics. You know what I mean? They're not gonna be like, oh my god, did you see that? That's the greatest match you've ever seen in your life. But these are fun to watch. They're fun, solid wrestling matches, and I think that's what is important. So the first one, the reason I wanted to do this list, is The Rock versus Eddie Guerrero from an episode of Raw on July the 22nd, 2002.
Okay.
At the time, Rocky was the undisputed champion, and Eddie Guerrero had just I think he came back to the company in 2002, about this time, a couple of months before. So he was not happy, old Eddie Guerrero, and he wanted to fight The Rock. And so the main event of the show was The Rock versus Eddie Guerrero. And it's really fun, as you would imagine, because The Rock is a great wrestler, and Eddie Guerrero all around just, one of the best. Those two guys know how to work. And, the match is, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes long, if even, but it's a lot of fun. I would recommend you check that out, at least. It's not going to blow you away. It's not going to change your life, but it's a fun match from two guys who know how to work.
Yeah, I can imagine they're two characters as well, which kind of mesh well together, like have a lot of fun with.
Yeah, well, they do a little promo earlier in the show, and it's really good, but like it's also a little weird. I mean, you'll have to see the promo to understand it, because I'm not even gonna try to do it justice. But Eddie's healing on his kids, I guess. So, yeah, you got to see it. And The Rock is, The Rock. So it leads to a match, and it's a lot of fun. So The Rock versus Eddie Guerrero, Raw, July 22nd, 2002. If you want to go check it out, it's a main event. So that's my first pick.
Okie doke. Well, for my first pick, it was kind of hard to choose one, because the rivalry was like Christian versus Randy Orton in 2011.
Ooh.
Where they had like a whole bunch of, fantastic matches, just great wrestling, really, like full of incredible counters to like familiar spots, and like playing off audience expectations and stuff, and Yeah, so they kind of spun like this whole thing out of Edge's retirement with Christian winning the world title and stuff, and it was almost like a sympathy run, I guess. But like he totally stepped up and delivered the goods in ring, and Randy Orton, I don't think he's looked as good as that for a long time as well. So the match I decided to go for was the first in this series, Over the Limit 2011. And yeah, it was kind of setting the bar high when like no one really going into it was expecting that much, I guess, because yeah, Christian and Randy Orton were both great wrestlers, but like no one expected them to deliver on that sort of level. So check it out.
That's a good call, man. I remember watching that like at the time, and I was never like the biggest fan of Randy Orton, but I've always been a big Edge Christian fan. So I watched this kind of series and pleasantly surprised. Like maybe that was when my opinion on Randy Orton kind of started to take a turn. Do you know what I mean? Because those two guys, they did some really good work together.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that whole sort of like post WrestleMania into the summer. Like I think they went all the way up to SummerSlam, maybe a bit longer, but like yeah, they just kept getting better and better, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they went to SummerSlam. Yeah. And there was a lot of like twists and turns and stuff. Like that's what I thought about Christian's whenever he won the championship the first time. You're like, oh, it's a bit of a pity reign, and here comes Randy Orton. We all know what's gonna happen here, and that'll be the end of it for Christian. Well, at least he got the belt for a little bit, but they did end up managing to spin a pretty good story out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I dig that. Nice, that's a good call. I really like that. Okay. Are you ready for my pick?
Yeah, go for it.
You ready for this? Have you ever heard of a gentleman called Dean Ambrose?
Dean Ambrose. Is he that guy who looks a bit like John Moxley?
He does look a little bit like John Moxley, doesn't he?
A little bit.
But he's got different names, so it couldn't possibly be him.
Ah, okay.
Although I've never seen the two of them in the same room against each other. Can you imagine if they had a fight, John Moxley and Dean Ambrose?
I think they'd match up pretty well.
It'd be like a mirror image.
Well,
let me tell you, in my pick, Dean Ambrose is not fighting John Moxley, as much of a shame as that is. But he is fighting a different gentleman. Have you ever heard of a man called William Regal?
Yes, he sounds familiar.
Yeah, Dean Ambrose versus William Regal from an FCW show, July 15th, 2012. I find this, the whole show isn't on the network, so if you just search for Dean Ambrose versus William Regal, you'll find this match. I was very happy with this because I'm a big Dean Ambrose / John Moxley fan. I am a huge William Regal fan.
Yeah.
I think William Regal is one of the most underrated wrestlers in modern recollection. I think he's fantastic, man. There's nothing that guy can't do. Like he can't do like luchador stuff, but he can do everything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And good golly, here's the thing: if he did attempt luchador stuff, he'd make it entertaining. Because that you give that man anything, he turns it into something wonderful. So Dean Ambrose and William Regal have a fight, and it goes exactly the way you would imagine it to. You know what William Regal's like? He's a technical wrestler, a lot of chain wrestling, a lot of submission stuff, a lot of holds and things like that. You know what Dean Ambrose is like? He's a brawler. He's more about having a street fight, about destroying his opponent as opposed to getting a win. And both of those characters come across perfectly in this one match. This is not a fast-paced match by any means, as you would you'd imagine from a William Regal match. It's not going to be a million miles an hour. It's paced very well. It tells a great story. It gets both guys over. Even at this point, 2012, William Regal wasn't wrestling a whole lot by 2012. But like, boy, that match, it gets his character over because it establishes exactly what he is, and it does the same for Dean Ambrose. So I think if you're like a proper wrestling fan, you should check that out. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
if all you like is fucking dives to the outside, or that stupid spot where one guy jumps up the turnbuckle on top of six guys who are waiting to catch him, and they're just standing around waiting to catch him, then you might not like this match. But if you just like a good old fucking wrestling match, then just two guys knocking the hell out of each other, I think you're gonna like that.
Well, it's funny you went for William Regal in one of your matches because I happened to pick him in one of mine as well from about
Excellent.
9 months before this Dean Ambrose match. It was on an episode of Superstars on November the 10th, 2011, taped in Liverpool, so in front of his home country crowd and everything, and it was against Daniel Bryan.
Yes, I remember this match.
It was a hell of a, technical battle between two guys who are obviously really great at like counter wrestling and just doing the little things as well that kind of add so much to a match. I guess kind of reminiscent of the British style as well, like in front of like the British crowd, which obviously worked really well as well. And yeah, it's just kind of a fascinating little time capsule, really, because I don't believe they wrestled any more matches not on TV anyway, in WWE against each other. But this was about a month or so before Daniel Bryan would cash in his like Money in the Bank contract and win the World Heavyweight Championship for the first time as well. So it was kind of a interesting, like I say, time capsule for just two guys who are obviously brilliant at wrestling, but like their careers were very much at different points at that stage of the game. Daniel Bryan on the ascendancy, William Regal, heading towards retirement. But they've obviously got loads of respect for one another. They've obviously they've trained together in the past. Like, Regal's been a big influence on Daniel Bryan, and yeah, it's just a nice little battle between the master and the protege.
Did you say this was a month before Daniel Bryan cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase?
Yes, I believe so.
So, like, a month before that, he's on Superstars?
Yeah.
How often do they fucking... Because I remember when they started Superstars, like, anybody could be on Superstars, and then, it soon ended up being enhancement talent or, other people like that. And so, like, do you think at that point they were like, this guy's he's gonna cash in and win,
Yeah,
well, also, I suppose, now that I'm saying this stuff out loud, I suppose that because it was in England, that would have been a perfect time for them, the WWE, I mean, to, pop the hometown crowd and give them a match with William Regal in it. Like, Superstars would have been the perfect place for that, because I assume that would have been after the Raw tapings.
After the SmackDown taping.
So that would have been like the dark match, technically, which would have had William Regal in it. So in a way, I guess I understand it, because people in Britain are gonna appreciate Daniel Bryan versus William Regal.
Yeah, I think I may be wrong here, but I think the backstory was William Regal requested the match because he knew like he was winding down and he wouldn't get much opportunity to get in the ring with Daniel Bryan, especially with like the impending, cashing in the Money in the Bank and everything as well, where that would definitely put him, out of his league, and they wouldn't have like the British crowd as well there. So I guess he made the request, and they kind of they wouldn't put it on SmackDown, but they were like, we'll stick it on Superstars instead then.
I mean, but that's exactly what I mean though. Like, it sounds callous for them to do, but also the SmackDown was there to advance storylines, whereas, no offense to either man, but William Regal versus Daniel Bryan wasn't a long-term storyline for them. But it makes sense to put it on Superstars as a little treat, a little bonus. Is that the one that he came out to his Man's Man music?
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember now.
There is a Daniel Bryan versus William Regal match. It might be that one, where William Regal comes out to his usual music, and halfway down the ramp, they switch the music to his old He's a Man music. And you can see on his face he doesn't know. He's like, what? And then he like wiggles like a comical Cockney villain. He wiggles his finger like, oh, you got me there, boys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can tell that he wasn't seeing he didn't see it coming. Oh, such a funny little spot. Anyway, that's a really good pick. You're doing pretty well so far.
Oh, thank you.
One of the picks that I had written down that I may as well tell you guys now also involves William Regal. And the reason I had put this on the back burner is because I'd found the Dean Ambrose William Regal match before this, and I was like, I don't want to William Regal it too much, but on the flip side, you can never have too much of William Regal.
Mm-hmm.
So get this, my friend. This actually, hang on, Daniel Bryan William Regal was 2011.
Yes.
The Dean Ambrose William Regal was from 2012. Get this, man. This is from December 2013.
Oh wow.
In NXT. William Regal versus Cesaro.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Now, it's similar to Dean Ambrose versus William Regal. It's just two guys going in there, telling the story and kind of working it out. I thought that there was more out of Regal in the Dean Ambrose match than in the Cesaro match. Cesaro does a lot of the, no pun intended, but he does a lot of the heavy lifting in this match. Cesaro does. So I like the Dean Ambrose versus William Regal match more, but then again, on the flip side, it's a really good way to put Cesaro over, to have him work against a guy as talented as William Regal, who knows as much about the business as William Regal, and it's a fun match. So I would, if you wanted to check them both out, feel free. You can never have too much William Regal.
Was that his last TV match?
It might have been. It really might have been, because I think that was the one. See, I had thought the Ambrose one was the one that retired him, and then I find this Cesaro one. So I'm like, okay, maybe that was his last match. They're both worth watching. If I were you, I'd watch the Cesaro one first, and then the Dean Ambrose one.
Okay.
Even though that's chronologically not in order, but that's just the way I enjoyed them. So
fair enough.
There you go.
It seems like we've got a bit of a British/European theme going on at the moment. So
you're not gonna that makes it sound like you've got somebody who is British but who is not William Regal.
I do. So obviously, Pete Dunne won the NXT UK Championship from Tyler Bate in a hell of a match, and then started putting together a hell of a title reign as well. So one of his best title defenses, I think, came on the November 28th, 2018 episode of NXT UK, which I believe is episode 11 on the network. But he was against Jordan Devlin, who, he's had some allegations against him recently, so I can imagine some folks might not want to watch one of his matches, but the two of them did go out and have like a really stellar match in, Dunn's hometown of Birmingham. It was like really hard hitting, everything's really crisp, like great psychology. I think this was at a point in Dunn's reign where he was just firing on all cylinders. I think he was about almost 550 days into like his 685 day reign, so he was pretty good at this point. But it also really helped elevate Devlin as well, who kind of was coming across as like a poor man's Finn Balor, really. But this really, helped establish him in NXT UK and prove that he was definitely more than that.
I dig it. I don't think I've seen that match. I'm, well aware of Pete Dunne, but really only from the network. I think you've seen him live before he was ever part of the WWE NXT, right?
Yeah, he's I'm not sure if he still is, but he was the owner of like the local promotion I go to, Attack Pro Wrestling.
So you're well familiar with this young gentleman.
I
I
am.
had never seen him till the network. I was very impressed. I gotta say, I'm like, I get it, man. That guy can work. Um, I will be honest with you. I never really saw the Jordan Devlin thing. I really did think he was a poor man's Finn Balor.
Mm-hmm.
But that's simply because that is exactly the way Jordan Devlin presents himself and wrestles. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Um, but that I'm sure that would be a good match though. I like how you were like, there has been some allegations about him, so people might not want to watch his match.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll just see what I got lined up for you
Uh-oh.
for the next match. Well, it's because you were talking about having a European theme. So I was like, why don't we keep that going?
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually have a match with another European on one of my things. So let's talk about this match. Fit Finlay. You're familiar with Fit Finlay.
Yeah,
He's one of ours.
he is, yeah.
He is one of the few Belfast boys. He's not actually from Belfast, but they're like, whatever. That's the only place we know in Northern Ireland. He's fucking from Belfast. It's not too far from Belfast, so practically Belfast.
Mm-hmm.
But it's Fit Finlay versus Chris Benoit.
Okay.
Now, I know some people don't like, they have a tough time watching Benoit matches, and I understand that. Like, he was a horrible monster.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he was a hell of a wrestler. Like, those are just two facts you can't change. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And my brother and I watched this match because the match I'm going to recommend after this one was on a show, and that match was the first opening match, and this match, the Benoit versus Fit Finlay match, was the second match on that show,
Mm-hmm.
which was Judgment Day in 2006.
Okay.
And so we stuck around for the other match, but we saw this match. We're like, we'll watch this one too, and it was a lot of fun. Like, if you know Fit Finlay, you know that he's a brawler.
Mm-hmm.
He's pretty. He can be stiff sometimes. His shit looks good. Like, he lays it in.
Yeah, yeah.
And Benoit similarly, great technical wrestler, but the guy knows how to move and to, he can brawl with the rest of, like, he makes his shit look good too. You know what I mean? The way he can strike, it looks very physical.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So you know what you're getting into with this match, and I think they deliver. Like, they really do. It's in like a complete opposite of, like, Ambrose and William Regal. This isn't too technical, but it's a lot of fun.
Mm.
It's just a lot of fun to watch because it just looks like two legitimate guys trying to beat the hell out of each other.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
pro wrestling is a part. I thought that was the point. I guess All Elite Wrestling disagree because there's no heels and baby. Yep, doing it again. I'm slagging off All Elite Wrestling. No heels and baby faces anymore. Just everybody's a shade of gray. So they're all friends and it's fine. I'm like, right, but if you establish a face and a heel, then you can establish heat, and then you can establish, like, who you want to win, and you can manipulate a crowd, and you can work a crowd, and you do the shit that professional wrestlers are supposed to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they do that in this match. I see how I did that. You see, I can always find a way back to All Elite Wrestling.
Yeah, it's like you got something really bad against him.
I was very close to making this podcast just all about how stupid it is that All Elite Wrestling don't have heels and faces. What the actual fuck? I think I would get too angry if I did a whole podcast about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's move away from that subject quickly.
Fuck him. What's your pick?
Yeah. Well, going by the same sort of match type, like kind of a brawler against someone more technical. But this isn't actually a WWE match or on the WWE network, although you can find it on YouTube pretty easily.
Oh my God.
But this is from IWA Mid-South from a show called Something to Prove from June the 11th, 2005. And it's Samoa Joe versus Necro Butcher. And, if people out there don't know who Necro Butcher is, he's pretty much like a grubby-looking homeless guy with a great big marijuana leaf tattoo on his arm, and he'd wear like a sleeveless T-shirt which said "Choose Death" on it and stuff like that.
He's a classy guy.
Yeah. He wrestles exactly the way you'd imagine someone who looks like that wrestles. Whereas Samoa Joe at this point, he was like coming to the tail end of his 645-day reign as Ring of Honor World Champion. I think he was just like days away from signing with TNA for the first time as well. So, he was in a situation where he probably could have taken it easy and just had like a nice night in the ring and left it at that. But instead, they pretty much just go out and beat the living shit out of each other in the old ECW arena with like chairs and railings, and Necro Butcher gets just really badly busted open whilst taking a pretty inhuman amount of punishment as well. It's definitely worth checking out if like hardcore wrestling's something you're interested in.
I'm intrigued. I really am. I haven't seen a whole lot of Necro Butcher stuff. I'm very familiar with him, but I haven't seen too many of his matches. That's an interesting choice, I gotta say. I will definitely have a look at that one, because that sounds like a lot of fun. I watched Samoa Joe versus CM Punk a couple of weeks ago, because the Ring of Honor put that up on their YouTube channel. It's a lot of fun.
Which one was that? Because they had a trilogy, didn't they?
I believe that was the first one.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. So that's something for you guys to pick out if you're on YouTube. The other match that I had from Judgment Day 2006, I believe it was 2006, the opening match was Eminem. Do you remember Eminem?
Yep.
John Morrison and
Joey Mercury
versus Paul London and Brian Kendrick for the tag team championships. This is the only tag team match I have on my list for some reason. But it's the good stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, here we have Brian Kendrick and Paul London, two kind of smaller guys who have to rely on they know psychology, they know how to work around the ring, right? But because they're smaller than a lot of other people, they do have to rely on a lot more kind of showmanship and flips and tricks and yada yada, athletic kind of things. Whereas they're in the ring with two just heels who want to beat the hell out of them. Eminem, who just kind of want to punch him in the face and have no time for these kind of flippy shenanigans. So you have a really good story there already. Eminem are the tag team champions. They've been the champions, been dominant champions. But going into this match, Paul London and Brian Kendrick have had their number every time. So they've found themselves in a tag team championship match. And it's a lot of fun because it's just four guys. And, you could even say back then that those guys were, not that they were new to the business by any means. They'd all four of them had been around for a while. But not even at the peak of their careers back then. Do you know what I mean? All four of those guys had so much more to give, and they fucking great way to open a show. Let's put it that they had plenty of time, told a good story, did a lot of fun stuff. Yeah, I would check that one out and also that way you can just watch two matches in a row. You can watch Eminem versus Kendrick London, and then Benoit versus Finlay, and then just turn off Judgment Day. Because apparently what else is on Judgment? Well, after those two matches was Melina versus Jillian Hall.
Right.
I'm going to tell you, that one, I don't want to sound controversial here, but that match was not as good as the first two. And later on in the night, apparently, I stopped after that, but apparently later on we had Kurt Angle versus Mark Henry, which just doesn't sound like a good matchup at all. And later on, The Undertaker versus the Great Khali.
Ah, classic.
So I was like, I think we got the best out of that show. I think the main event was Rey Mysterio versus JBL, which I'm sure was pretty good. But, stick with the first two matches at Judgment Day 2006 and you will be okay.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned Kurt Angle there, and like
I thought you were gonna say the Great Khali.
Well, Kurt's like John Morrison in a way. Like the way that he picked up the business was really, really fast, and like they just looked naturals in the ring really quickly. But I decided to go for one of Kurt's later matches, actually in TNA at this point, because arguably he kind of hit his wrestling peak in TNA, even though he was kind of a bit messed up at the time in terms of like prescription drugs and alcohol and stuff. But yeah, I mean, he was still having amazing matches. And one of the ones that kind of gets forgotten about is from Turning Point 2008, where it was a Falls Count Anywhere match with Abyss, which is another one of these like, hardcore battles where it literally went all over and, kind of tore up the Impact Zone as well. But like it was just a wild fight between Kurt being at the top of his game, Abyss, who was arguably, really hitting his stride as a big man performer then as well. Like this was sort of around the time when I believe he started speaking by this point. He ditched James Mitchell. And I think this is like not that long after he'd come back with like the white asylum uniform look as well. So this was like during the evolution of Abyss, really. Whereas Kurt Angle was part of the Main Event Mafia, which had just started up around that time as well. But yeah, there's the one big spot that everyone always remembers is the one where Kurt's on the stage and Abyss is on the floor, and then Kurt's just like, fuck it, and then does like a running somersault dive that just looks insane right into Abyss.
Classic Kurt Angle, He was always up to that kind of stuff in TNA.
Yeah, he was putting it all on the line.
Which, probably had nothing to do with all the drugs.
Probably.
No, I don't think they're related at all. That's a good call. I imagine you can watch that one on YouTube, or does TNA have their own like subscription thing?
Yeah, they have their own own on-demand service called Impact Plus. Although if you check out Dailymotion, they might have it on there.
That's the best thing about Dailymotion. Is like you put that shit up on YouTube, someone's gonna take that down in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You put that shit up on Dailymotion, nobody knows what it is. That's the way to do it. Nobody seems to have twigged onto that.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little surprise for anybody listening to the show, but if you want to watch the show, fucking watch it. Search for it on Dailymotion. You'll probably get what you're looking for.
We say this while our show is on YouTube as well.
Can you imagine if somebody ripped it off YouTube and put it on Dailymotion? Yeah. I'll be like, well, nothing we can do about it. Was that your last pick, or do you have another one?
I have one more.
Okay, well, I kind of have one, which I just wrote in as a joke.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll see. I think you'll see why. So I was looking for something on the network, and I was gonna look for a Raven match because I love Raven.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to watch like Raven versus Sandman, because I'm like, this is gonna be fucking hardcore. Mm-hmm. This is gonna be ridiculous, But they were all like really long, and I didn't really feel like watching a really long match. So I'm like, all right, maybe not Raven versus Sandman right now. Let me just have a look let's just keep Raven in the mix and look for something there, which led me to this star-studded, 6 out of 5 star match. Which I bet I'll put money on it that I bet you didn't even know existed. But get ready for this, my friend. The coveted, the legendary Raven versus Maven match. March 28th, 2002. I believe it was on SmackDown. Honest to God, I can't remember. I think it was SmackDown. But I watched it just because it was Raven versus Maven. Like, when is that ever going to happen again?
That's true, I guess.
It's such a perfect Raven versus Maven. Maven was the hardcore champion going into that match. And about 2 minutes later, Raven walked out of there with the Hardcore Championship. So that tells you all you need to know about Raven's matches in the WWE, about how much they valued Maven, and about how their Hardcore division was going.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Tells you everything you need to know. I'll be honest, not a classic, not the best, not even the best 2-minute Hardcore match I've ever seen, but it's Raven versus Maven. Like as a piece of history, I had to see it.
That's fair enough. I'll give you that. It's funny you went for a Raven match because I went for an ECW match as my last pick. Not Raven himself though, but a character who was, kind of associated with him over the years.
It's gotta be the Blue Meanie.
No, it was Beulah McGillicuddy versus Bill Alfonso, in just like the bloodiest, briefest brawl that you've ever seen, especially between two guys who weren't actually wrestlers. They just absolutely beat the shit out of each other for about 7 minutes, and yeah. Alfonso gets busted open so badly that they thought he must have nicked an artery when he bladed, and Paul Heyman after the match was claiming that he'd lost 1/3 of the blood in his body. And apparently Beulah, according to Tommy Dreamer, broke her arm during the match but still managed to finish it as well, so it's pretty crazy all around, really. And it was I think the show was called As Good as It Gets from 1997.
Is that as good as it gets?
I mean, it really is. This was peak ECW, I'd say.
Yeah, actually, 1997 was pretty good. Well, I thought a lot of it. 1996 was pretty good too.
Yeah.
But I would say that because that was kind of when Raven was a big shot.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously. Well, that's the thing. I was so close to putting a legitimate Raven match on this on my pick, Raven versus Sandman. But no, I went with Raven versus Maven. I stick by it. Beulah McGillicuddy versus Bill Alfonso. I gotta say, that's maybe more of a left field pick than Raven versus Maven.
Yeah, I don't know because this is
I didn't see that coming at all.
It's one of the more famous ECW matches. On the what was it? I think it was the Rise and Fall of ECW. They might have even had a whole little chapter devoted to this match. So.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, that's something I can go watch too.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Well, there we go. There is a couple of our suggestions for fun wrestling matches you can go back and watch that will hopefully rekindle your love of wrestling. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just to watch some good, fun, dopey bullshit, But still stuff that makes sense. Still classic matches. You know what I mean?
Except for Raven versus Maven.
Well, that was a classic in that it encapsulates all of what the hardcore division was like back in 2001 and 2002. So it's a snapshot into history, and therefore is kind of a classic.
Plus, it's probably the only match with two guys whose names rhyme as well.
Right, but does that ever happen?
Never
happens. Never. There you go. So it's a slice of history right there. Raven versus Maven. So yeah, those are suggestions. I'm gonna go check out some of John's suggestions for sure, and hopefully you guys like the cut of this. I would like to do this again sometime. A little episode like this, just every so often, kind of come up with some more matches. Love to hear what other people would consider some underrated gems or some things that other people need to check out if they're interested. So leave all that stuff in the comments and let us know because we really want to know. We just want to find more fun wrestling to watch,
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So is that it? Are we good?
I think so.
Excellent. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Really appreciate it. We'll be back soon with a podcast that hopefully doesn't depress both of us. No promises. But yeah, thanks for listening, guys, and we will see you in the next one.